Good morning. This is the Board of County Commissioners Board Work Session. It is Friday, October 6, 2023. It is 9:03 a.m. This session is set to go until 11:45. We will recess and pick up back at 1:30 and go to 4:15 p.m. This is a hybrid meeting. We're at 3000 Pacific Avenue Southeast, room 110. For public virtual attendance, you may follow along on the Thurston County YouTube channel. I'm Carolina Mejia. I'm the chair of the board. In the boardroom is Vice Chair Ty Menser, as well as Commissioner Gary Edwards. We have interim county manager Robin Campbell, as well as assistant county manager Rob Gelder, and our budget team to continue on with the 2024 through 2025 budget presentations. This morning, we have the auditor's office presenting to us. And Nicole, should I pass it to you or pass it to Auditor Mary Hall?
Oh, you could pass it to me, Commissioner. Thank you.
Okay.
So Nicole Martinez, Budget and Fiscal Manager. Robin
Right,
would like to say something.
so Robin Campbell, interim county manager. And before we begin today, I just wanted to make a brief announcement that we have been having technical difficulties with the equipment that allows us to live stream these meetings. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna start off with live streaming. Should the live streaming fail, the recording continues. So we will just keep going and we will post every recording in its entirety no later than the day following these meetings. So if you lose us on live stream, we'll be back as quickly as possible, but we're just gonna continue because we will be recording.
Thank you. So we're here today to speak about the 2024-2025 biennium. This is a series of presentations from departments and offices to talk about their policy level requests. Today is just informational. And these policy level requests from the departments and offices, we are reviewing them per state law to make sure that we are adhering to all requirements needed to present information to the public. And with that, I'll hand it over to the auditor.
Great, thanks. Well, I'm not sure if it's good or bad to be the first presentation in the morning, but hopefully everybody's had their coffee and hopefully I can read this screen. That's my concern here, but so far it looks like I can. So as you know, the auditor's office is made up of a bunch of very diverse departments. They don't have anything to do with each other. Elections, licensing, recording, issue marriage licenses, passports, and then we do a lot of financial things for the county, reporting, accounts payable, payroll. We're the accountants for many of the smaller departments. We do the cost plan, internal audit, and we have a really good grants manager who's really helped me find grants and write grants and get grants. And so, next slide. And we also have several funds that we manage. Our 1050 is our auditor's M&O fund, and that's basically funded by a portion of the recording fees, and it's very restricted. We can only use that fund for the preservation of historic documents. However, we do fund a position in the clerk's office with this fund, and it qualifies under the requirements. Fund 1090, that's our equipment reserve fund. This is funded by the 15% overhead that we bill jurisdictions. So we bill out all of our election costs to all the jurisdictions based on prorated formula of how many races they have on the ballot, how many candidates. And with that billing, we tack on a 15% overhead, which goes into our equipment reserve fund to ensure that we can have updated and current equipment. Fund 1610 is something that we created in 2016. And we put that together because presidential election years are like elections on steroids. They're very expensive. We have an additional election as a presidential primary. So that's a savings account. So we fund this fund every year. And then when it comes to a presidential election year, we break that piggy bank, if you will, to ensure that we don't have to come to you with these, huge requests in presidential years. So we don't really have big budget requests. Essentially what we're looking at is funding 2 FTE project positions out of 1610, which in 2020, we actually had 3. And we started them in the fourth quarter of the year prior to the presidential election. This year, we're just gonna start them in the first quarter. And I'll get into public records requests a little later, but we're requesting 2 project positions in 2024 and then a project position in 2025 to work with us on public records requests, because that's a new phenomenon since the 2020 election, and it's turned out to be huge and very, very time consuming. And we're also bringing in a substantial amount of revenue that we've not seen in the past. The state started paying their share of election costs beginning in 2022, which they never did before. We would have to absorb federal and state election costs, and now we're able to bill them, which is huge. And that's over $1 million in the general fund, and it's for eternity, because I don't think they'll ever be able to go back on that and not fund elections. So, next slide. Back one to a table. Roll up. Okay, that's okay. The other fund that we use project positions in is our 1050, which is our historical imaging project. We actually have project positions where they're going and doing a lot of back scanning. Our goal is to scan documents back to 1950, so the public can access those all online and not have to come into our office. So it frees up our staff, and it's just really good customer service for the county, and it's funded by our preservation of historic document funds.
Is that the one that's at the clerk's office?
Yeah, that's actually not in this table, but yes, we also fund one at the clerk's office.
So Mary, we see on this chart that from your other funds, that the personnel costs are quite low.
Mhm.
The bulk of the money is spent on other things. Could you just mention what types of things you buy out of these restricted funds?
Sure. So that number's pretty high. This year, we're buying a new sorter. That's the machine that you put the ballots on that sorts it down to precinct, takes a picture of the signature and checks the ballot in essentially. And then we're also buying new ballot scanners that come with a lot of new features, like they're not gonna jam as much, or have double feeds and things like that, which make it really difficult to reconcile. It's like stop everything. So these are much better in that regard. So they changed the machines a little bit, the ballot scanners. So that's the big outlay. Plus, we are looking at upgrading or buying a new recording system, which we have not purchased for a long time. I think this recording system we've had since 2006. So it's, there are a lot of new features out there. I want to implement, more fraud prevention, because real estate transaction or real estate fraud, people stealing homes and things like that, is becoming more sophisticated. So we want to make sure that we've got some safeguards in place so we can hopefully fend that off, because that's pretty scary.
Right, and we can afford these because one of the funds that Mary manages is specifically for elections equipment.
Right, exactly. And it's funded by all the jurisdictions, throughout the county, so. All right, so opportunities and challenges. I'm really happy we set up the stabilization fund, because it allows us to, utilize that revenue next year when our expenses are really, really high. Not only because of additional turnout, we have more observers, but we have an extra election in the presidential primary. So we'll have 5 elections next year, because everybody goes in the special election in a presidential year because you don't want to go the year after because turnout is so high and if you have to validate. And anyway, there are a lot of reasons. So we don't even have a special election budgeted in 2025, just FYI. We're also excited that we're going to utilize our career ladder. And what this is, in licensing and recording, everybody starts either as a recording specialist or a licensing specialist. And we've had this agreement with the union that we can cross-train these people and cross-utilize them in other departments. But with that, they get a little bump in pay and a promotion. But what it does for us is it really gives us a lot of depth, and it allows us to have more people available to process the complex transactions that we have. So it's not a huge thing, but I think that's a great opportunity, and it takes a lot for them to be ready for this. So I'm excited that we have people that are. Provide the proper level of staff classification. Thank you for reclassifying that. That was actually a suggestion from Sherry and Maria when we really looked at that position and what kind of skills did they need, you know, with Oracle, because that's a whole different animal than Munis. And, you know, they need to know SQL and a lot more technical things. Plus, they have to understand government finance. And that's a tough mix, but hopefully we'll be able to attract the person. And then I would love to strengthen, you know, have another internal auditor. I think our internal auditor has done more, paid for itself multiple times over. And, you know, we're getting to be a larger county. We could certainly utilize a second one, whether, you know. Some of our challenges, you know, of course, we're always competing for new revenue, but I'm really proud of the fact that, you know, through my work in legislation, you know, I've been instrumental in helping secure additional revenue. In fact, 3.7 million from 2019 to 2023. And with the even year funding and the increase in licensing fees that, you know, are continuing, we anticipate at least $1 million of new revenue a year. This started in 2022, so we're gonna see that on an ongoing basis. And that's even with the slowdown in the real estate market, because we've seen an increase in our licensing transaction as well as passports. Some of our challenges, though, our election employees are paid below market, which was pointed out in the class and comp study, and we're feeling the effects of that. I lost a person to Pierce County not too long ago, and I have a person interviewing with the Secretary of State's office as we speak. And I can't blame them. They've got kids in college, and they're, you know, there's nowhere for them to go, really.
What's the difference in pay that you might be facing?
Well, give you an example of Pierce County. Romero authorized paying this person at the very top of the range they were at, and it was still about 10,000 below.
It was less than.
Yeah, it was, even at the top of the range, was substantially less money for her going to Pierce County and doing the exact same job. So it's a lot. So, and having come from there and ran that department, I'm very aware of their structure versus ours and their pay versus ours, so. So another challenge is, you know, TC Connect. This is a big project, and I have a fantastic financial team, but when we're in high gear in TC Connect, they're essentially doing two jobs. And it's an awful lot. I appreciate them more than you would ever know. And I mean, they're rock stars. They haven't lost anybody yet. Hopefully I won't, but we really owe them a, you know, huge kudos, because they're burning the candle at both ends. So hopefully there's light at the end of the tunnel in the not too distant future. I've also got two really key financial folks that are retirement eligible. My personnel lead, as well as a lead in my senior most person in financial services, are both retirement eligible. And that's really tough to have that institutional knowledge walk out the door. But, you know, we're working hard to cross-train some people, so it won't be such a hit. And then, of course, with elections, space is always an issue, especially going into next year's presidential election. And of course, we have new security issues that we've never had to deal with. Voter challenges, which I've never had to deal with, which is incredibly time consuming and, but it may be the new normal. And then, of course, we face misinformation and having to squelch that every single day. And I want to talk about public records requests. You know, I was going to come and ask for an FTE for public records because it has turned out to be a huge effort in our office. You know, we had 4 in 2018, which isn't on the slide, but you can see how they've grown, and they're complex. It's not like, you know, give me this report. And this 91 doesn't even include the public records requests we get from your friends. So this is just elections. But, you know, just to give you an idea, this is what they look like, you know. And just to give you an idea, this is a short one. I would like copies of any list, logs, manifest showing which voters were mailed signature update forms, why voters were sent the form, the date they were sent the form, the date the form was returned and received, whether the voter's signature was updated in response. This request also includes copies of the cover letter signature forms that were sent out, any internal and external correspondence such as email, messages, notes, letters concerning sending, receiving signatures, any directives from county, state, or federal officials, and any requests or inquiries from individuals or organizations requesting signature update letters be sent out. And we've gotten some that request, like, we want every email. And that may not sound like much, but when it's 3,000 emails, you have to look at every single one because you have to see, is there personal information we need to redact? Is there stuff that is not public per state law? So you have to redact a lot. And we have a couple of requests that we've been working on for over a year. So, and the people that work on these, you have to have senior people who understand what they're doing. I mean, it's really Diana and Tilly. And because public records are a huge liability, as you know, if you miss something and then the person comes back and says, well, wait a minute, I got this from the other county, why don't you have it? I mean, you can get fined every single day that, you know, for not sending that document. So it's pretty expensive. So, you know, I hope they go away someday, but I'm not optimistic, and we'll see. And in your packet, you should also have a letter of support from prosecuting attorney Thunheim, because they feel it as well, because we work with their staff continually on these efforts. So, okay, next slide. So our first priority is basically the transfer from Fund 1610 into the general fund. It's basically just money in and out, but it will fund our 2 FTEs in 2024 and 1 in 2025, and also just the additional expenses that we incur in any presidential election. And you know, when you think of elections, you think of the ballot processing center and voter registration, but we're actually required by law to stand up 3 voting centers. One is a student hub at Evergreen State College. Evergreen is specifically called out in statute. And then we need 2 others, one at Lacey Library, and then of course we do have the one that's our major voting center with voter registration. However, I expect Lacey Library to be much busier because people, you know, it's been in place for a while, so it's gonna be interesting. We're gonna be.
So before we go ahead.
Well, I just don't quite, so are these positions are these a 1-year position to deal with the presidential election? And then they'll
Yeah, so 2
on-
project positions that will be for.
that's why you're calling them project positions?
Yes,
Because they're just
yeah.
for limited time?
For 2024 only, and we're starting in the first quarter instead of this year, third quarter, which we've done in the past. And then the public records help project position will be in 2025. That was the one I was hoping would be a FTE, but we're gonna, you know, see how it goes, and
And
see how
that
it
can
goes.
be that can be appropriately funded through election stabilization.
Yes,
And then on our cheat sheets that we're marking, it says election stabilization, general fund.
Mhm.
How does that affect, we need to know how each piece affects
Let me
general
double
fund.
check.
Yeah, I believe it's all election stabilization fund. We're transferring the revenue that was put into election
Okay, so
stabilization.
scratch
fund.
out the general.
Yeah, that's the transfer.
All right, perfect,
Okay.
thank you.
Okay. And you had a question, Robin?
No, that was pretty much covered my questions. so
Okay,
Thank
okay.
you.
And our second request is for Fund 1090, just for some additional equipment that we're going to need. We're actually rolling a grant over that we had fully intended on taking possession in 2023 of this equipment, but a lot of other jurisdictions across the country had the same idea. So we could get it in 2023, but we'll have it early first quarter. So, oh, okay. So, yeah, so anyway, the other, the other is a reclassification for the finance Oracle person, and the prior person in the position was at the top of the range. So this new request is really only $8,000 additional to the general fund. This was a number that was given to us by HR.
We didn't just do this?
You approved the position reclassification yesterday.
This is an
but the
existing
salary,
position.
You know, because it came after a certain point in time, the salary increase is not in next year's budget, so she's asking.
We made the decision, so this is not a
That's-
decision point for
Yeah,
us.
That's right.
And
But
the
at the
position
time it
exists
came in-
as a lower classification, so this budget request is simply to fund our budget for the higher classification for this person.
But it's in policy, because at the time the budget came in, you had not made a decision yet.
Okay,
That makes sense?
yep,
Okay,
So-
got it.
all right. Next slide. Oh, this is the next slide. Okay, so this policy request, we weren't sure whether to put this in or not. We got kind of mixed answers, but this is new, so I figured I'd rather err on the side of transparency and put it in here, but beginning in May of 2023, DOL now requires that we send our title work to them, certified traceable mail. So that's more expensive, and a cost we didn't have in prior years. We've also had an increase in transactions, which is great, and postage has gone up as well. So that's what that $12,000 is.
If I may, jump in. When we first started going through the budget, we were not sure if we should put this in policy or maintenance, but it has been put in maintenance and it's included in the
This
maintenance
is a
budget.
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
okay,
So it's
good.
not policy.
We weren't
How
sure,
about,
so.
did we request the state to reimburse us at all for unfunded mandates?
No, because we collect licensing fees and retain those.
Well, I mean, the new requirement of mailing and things, I mean, it's not a lot, but it's an unfunded mandate now, isn't it?
Well, they increased the portion the county keeps of per,
The
Oh,
state
to
did,
offset it.
yeah,
Okay,
so.
not unfunded.
The next request is what I talked about, that's our career ladder. More and more counties are starting to implement this system, and I think some departments in the county, but again, you know, they start as a licensing clerk or a recording clerk, then they're, you know, as they get proficient there, we cross-train them so they can do either or, which is a huge advantage for us because we've got young staff, you know, who, you know, think of having babies and things like that. And then they're gone for a little while, so it really gives us an opportunity to have more people that can deal with the complex transactions. So we anticipate we've got 4 ready for this, which is exciting because it's been a couple years before since we've had anybody that really was able to qualify for these promotions. So I've just got some amazing staff right now.
And that's the total combined.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the total combined for all of them, not for each, so. So this is for our historical imaging project, again, to staff the 2 project positions. And they're currently I mean, we currently have these positions, so this is really a reauthorization to build this fund for these positions. So we're making very good progress. The person who is doing, one of our project people, just indexed 100,000 documents this year.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's pretty exciting.
How far back do these documents go?
We're going back to 1950,
Are you working back year by year?
Yeah.
So what year are you at?
like in the 70s. Yeah, so we've got a couple years. The other thing we're doing is QCing these documents because back in the way back times, I don't know when, but they hired a company to do a lot of the scanning and some of the documents weren't scanned really well. They're not really legible. So we're re-scanning a lot of documents. We're QCing back as we go also. So it's really good. This is actually a request from Commissioner Mejia, which I think is a great idea. This, you know, our internal audit program has served the county very well. You know, we continue to get clean audits and, you know, I think Auditor McCarthy, State Auditor McCarthy coming to give that award really spoke to the benefits of this. You know, I know that we're in tough times, so I'm not holding my breath, but you know, if this isn't funded, we do have a very, very good grants manager that might be able to do some of these, like some subrecipient monitoring. She's got over 20 years experience. She's very good. She's very thorough. She understands, you know, CFR 200 and all the other, you know, requirements very well. But I thought it was important to put this in there. If we can't do it now, hopefully we can do it in the future. And then this last request is a grant. This is for our student voting hub, and we received this grant actually in 2000. So this is the remainder of it, and we'll use this next year to help stand up the Evergreen grant or Evergreen voting hub. And then, of course, we've got our security grants from the Secretary of State's office, 160,000, it's 80,000 each year. We really want to be careful or make sure we spend this money timely because 80,000 needs to be spent by June 30th of next year. And then our federal grant, our HAVA grant, which we were awarded in 2000, has to be spent in 2024 as well. So that's by the end of September.
There's money coming in,
Pardon me?
money coming in.
This is grant money coming in, so we just need to make sure that we spend it. And we've
It's not in
certainly been
between
talking to Rick about this, they're aware of it.
Parentheses
But I
are-
think
'cause it's-
what this speaks to is the importance of keeping this project moving forward. But it sounds like they're having really good success with the permit people in Tumwater, and everybody's being very cooperative, so fingers crossed. But it makes me nervous because I don't like giving money back. I like spending down to zero when it comes to grants,
Spending
so.
authority for the money.
Yeah,
Right.
so it's
Someone-
grant revenue
Mary,
that's gonna
that
cover
one
the
for,
project.
you said as per state law on the Evergreen Voting Center,
Mhm.
do they finance that or do they give us anything to make that?
There's a
make
grant
that
award that
happen?
supports.
Yeah, there's a grant award that supports that. So it's not that expensive. I mean, we're just required to set up before Election Day, but it has to operate, you know, almost like a full voting center, not 100%, which is why it's not called a voting center, but we've pretty much got it down, and it's really equipment costs because, I mean, you can't really keep equipment for 4 years when it comes to laptops and things like that. They just become obsolete, so. And then the last one, I'm really excited and very proud that we got this because I didn't think we were going to. You know, when you do it, well, maybe not, when you do a grant presentation and you just have like, can't read the room at all. And but anyway, we were awarded a grant to pour a 75-foot walkway from the bus stop on 29th to the front door of the voting center. And I'm super excited about this because, you know me, I'm very big on accessibility, and I knew we didn't have this, well, it wasn't an eligible expense in the grant money we had. And I knew it would have been a tough sell for general fund, so I'm thrilled we got this, so. But again, we have to have this project done in 2024, and I never knew that tree roots could be an issue, so.
Could I just point out that isn't this a grant that we had, in order to qualify, we had to have our advisory committee.
Yes,
The only reason we had the advisory committee is because you and I worked together to kind of
to stand it up.
to stand it up and move it into your shop, and this is the fruit of that
Yeah,
effort.
exactly. And this is just for us, but I mean, the county can, put in for other grants also. Public Works would be a really likely candidate, as well as other, jurisdictions and people like that. And we're also working with inner city transit to put one, covered area at that bus stop. So hopefully that will be in place for next year also. Alright, so again, this is out of 1050. This is, I talked about this earlier for a new recording system. There are new systems out there with new bells and whistles, so we'll see about that, and that, is a restricted fund.
Is this like a software system? Is that what
Yeah.
we're talking about? Okay.
Anyway, any questions? Is that it?
Does this, like a purchase like this, does this cut into your ability to hire or you maintain a couple of staff, the 2.25 FTEs?
No, we can do both.
You can do
However,
both, okay.
if we were forced to take a reduction in staff, this is one place where we could move staff into, which is what we did during the pandemic in 2020, because we weren't open to the public, right? So we moved people into 105 or 1050 and just had them working on the imaging project. But it's not ideal because then, we don't have the staff to do the work, and it's, they have to be working on the imaging project to build to that fund.
And could you do that on a permanent basis?
Well, until the project runs out or the money runs out, but, no, not and really maintain the services that we have. We would probably, passports is the only thing that's not required by law, right? And what we've been able to do recently, which I'm very excited about, is actually just offer walk-ins. And I wouldn't want to let people go, because as soon as the housing market picks up, or interest rates drop, the housing market is gonna pick up, refinances are gonna go crazy because people are buying homes at high interest rates. I know that firsthand. So, yeah.
So would we like to get into reductions?
Yeah, and that's where really we could save some general fund money, is by moving some staff into 1050. But again, it's not ideal. We would probably eliminate the walk-in passports just because we wouldn't have the resources. I didn't ask for a public records person, and the thing is, we bring in a lot of revenue to support what we do, and we're pretty lean. And if you look at, what we're gonna spend in 2025 is actually less than what we spend in 2023. So our our maintenance level is going down, because we do adjust to what, the ebb and flow of our industry. And even when we had that position, we had that second position for quite a while, we did not staff that until we got into the atrium, because we didn't have any place to really do additional transactions. So we only, hired that person in the, close to fourth quarter. So we work really hard to manage our expenses and work with revenue, and, are we busy, are we not? So.
What is the
20
number that, from the formulas that we were working with, that auditor would have to target?
Jennifer, look at my computer, it's not coming on this morning. I don't think the PowerPoint is on.
Hold on, just just a moment. The auditor's rejection target is 657,000.
Is it working now?
And so, Auditor, do you want to describe what your strategy is if they have the cut of 600?
I'm sorry, Mary, I don't have your fund numbers
Right,
memorized when you
if
said
we have
moving.
to take that cut, we would move a couple people, probably 50% of both supervisors into 1050 and have them working on the historical preservation project.
Mary, can you do that and still make that $600,000 purchase?
No, we would not make the
So that's the
$600,000
difference.
purchase. That would be the
Kick down
trade-off.
there.
That's the trade-off.
Yeah, and then, yeah. We would probably go back to just appointments for passports also. You know, which is kind of, not ideal.
How many are you
because
doing now? Are you doing our passports up?
They're absolutely. So in 2019, which was, our one full year before the pandemic, we did 3,294. And 2023, when I put this together, which doesn't include probably this week, 3,895, so almost 4,000 year to date. And in May of 2025, Real ID kicks in, which means you either have to have a passport or enhanced driver's license to get on an airplane. So we're going to see a huge uptick. Also, the city of Lacey used to issue passports, but I found out when I was calling them for utilities that they no longer issue passports and they actually referred them to my office. So it's really us and the post office
Did
that
they
issue
quit at
passports.
about the same time you started or something?
No, they still issued them for quite a while. It's new to us, nobody knew that. Staff didn't know that they quit issuing them either. But what we're also hearing is that the travel industry is also referring them to us. And, the risk we take if we no longer have walk-ins is, it takes a long time to get a passport anyway through the State Department, but what I don't want is for them referring them up to Pierce County, which is where a lot of people used to go. Because the post office, it's interesting, love the post office, but if this person is on vacation, it's like no passports today. Or if they're sick, they just shut it down and they only are, I think 10 to 3 are their hours.
Do the other municipalities around the county?
We're at,
You're
So I'm sorry, I'm really confused. Auditor M&O fund is what number?
is 50, it's 1050.
Okay,
1050.
but when I look at this document, it says Fund 1050, Preservation of Historical Documents.
Right.
That's the official name.
So what I
Same
would do
thing?
is,
It's the same.
yeah,
Okay.
yes.
Process that for a minute.
Yes.
So, so that's the fund from which you were gonna purchase your recording system?
Yes,
And that is included in
no. What I would do for cost savings is take my 2 supervisors and probably, a little bit of other staff and move them into the historical document project.
Using the
So they would
money
be
that-
paid for out of,
using the money that would have gone to a recording system, but now it's gonna go to these employees and that comes out of the general fund.
right,
So it's like a little train.
right.
Got it. Okay, that wasn't super clear from,
You can still only spend $1 once.
Yeah,
yep. All right, thank you.
So this fund is, the revenue is from recording fees, right?
correct. Which is based on real estate transactions,
That's
so.
gonna drop.
so-
Yeah.
If we did that, it's certainly not growing like it has in the past when the real estate market was really hot. The other thing that could be an unintended consequence is we might not be able to continue to fund the imaging person in the clerk's office. So,
It's a policy level request for the clerk this year.
right,
Still
Yeah.
work.
to have the other FTE come out of 1050 for the historical imaging project.
Could you speak just a little louder,
Yes,
please?
I'm sorry. So the clerk is asking for this biennium to have a position out of 1050, the auditor M&O fund, the historic preservation fund for that project. And I believe Mary is saying that if this was to go through with her cuts, that that position would not be something that.
I wouldn't
that
say
fund-
would not, it may not.
May
It would
not.
depend on, you know, the real estate market and just what happens with that fund.
Okay.
So,
Yes, because the revenues are going down and what can be supported there.
right. But the good news, I mean, the real estate revenue or recording revenue is going down, but at the same time, licensing revenue is going up. So, and passports are going up. So actually, as far as, you know, what we budgeted as an office, I don't think we're in the red, are we?
We're flat.
Yeah, we're flat,
We're flat.
but,
That's a new
but
term.
we're still in the black, so.
Actually, it's for license and recording, $56,569 back to the general fund as an add.
Can the election equipment be bought with ARPA funds? Is that qualifying?
I don't believe so.
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
It can't be used for general government purposes.
And unfortunately, it can't be, we can't use it with our security funds either. Believe me, I've tried.
Right, but it can be used from the fund for, you know, that we put money into for that purpose. It's not a general fund impact.
The other thing we could do to save money is not fund 1610, which is the stabilization fund. However, that could, you know, we're gonna have to pay the piper at some point in time,
How
and
much
that
money is
could
that?
hurt us in 2028.
How
Right,
much do you put in there each year?
125,000.
the election stabilization
Right,
fund, not
yeah.
the general
Right.
stabilization fund.
So that's a transfer into that fund, and yeah.
But what that would result in is going back to what we used to do in the past, where the auditor's budget, every year, we'd adjust for elections, one year to go way down, and the next year to have to go way up, and then way down and up, and so every year it was a roller coaster ride.
Right.
The stabilization fund allows us to set aside money and have a set amount for elections, and yet Mary can spend the amount she needs
Right.
in each year.
Yeah, but keep in mind too, at even years now, I mean, the state is we bill them the most in even year elections. They pay a huge amount of election costs now, which actually reduces our election costs. So that's a, you know, a big windfall that's not going away.
So,
And, you know, and another thing that Ty and I talked about briefly, you know, I know WASAC has tried for the utility tax for counties. You know, I think a lot of us independently elected officials are legislative chairs this year. And, you know, it might be worth it to resurrect that bill and just do a full court press and, you know, get all the affiliates working really hard on that, because we have a story to tell. And I'm sure it's not just Thurston County. And that would be huge. So, and I'm not gonna let anybody tell me, we've tried that for over, you know, blah, blah, blah. They tried to get election funding for 30 years, the auditors. So, I mean, that's why I won every award there was in 2020. So, because nobody ever thought it could be done. And they fought me to even resurrect it and bring the bill back up. So, it could happen.
The challenge is making sure that it remains flexible versus being restricted, since it would be assigned or coming from a utility.
Yeah, well, if, you know, look at the bill and let's rework it. And legislation is fun for me, so.
So the recording system is what I was meaning to ask about ARPA, not the elections equipment, because that's through a separate fund. Just going back to Fund 1050, right? So you're saying that if you're it's either one or the other in order for the fund to kind of
To
be
be-
stable.
Right,
So you would either have to move 50% of, or supervisors and 2 staff members into,
no, I already have 2 project people, so I would just use 50% of 2 supervisors and maybe some time for additional, but yeah, I couldn't move 50%.
okay, so then you would move 50% of 2 supervisors into that fund. If you were to do that, then the recording system is just not.
Yeah, we wouldn't be able to do
You
that
just
right now,
postpone getting it until a later date or something?
which isn't the first time we've done that.
We've been waiting
So-
till after TC Connect.
Yeah. So,
And the recording system does not qualify because it's general government.
And as Robin described, it's not general fund. There are recording fees for that specific allowable purpose that we can pay for
Right,
people,
but
or we can pay for systems, right? One or the other.
Figure out
yeah.
how to
Do both?
get you that and allow for the transfer of staff. But
well,
even if you transferred staff in, just part of the cost of 2 supervisors wouldn't get you to 600,000.
It's supervisors and staff.
80,000, a little under 100,000 maybe for those.
supervisors and, I mean, how much staff did we figure?
Do I have charge again?
I'm seeing maybe
Mary's
like
at a bit of a
125.
disadvantage because she was on vacation for most of the.
Yeah, this was a really hard one
Yeah.
for me because usually I'm,
It's essentially
together.
redirecting so that you have a dedicated supervisor, we have a primary scanning person and another one, and they do the verification of the data and the cleanup. So it's a project team that will essentially, just like she did during the pandemic, it was all hands on deck or more hands on deck of that project. Because it's currently like 4.5 more years, and there would be a lot more progress made during this temporary in nature redirect out of the general fund. So it is.
We're also looking for permanent
Mhm.
reductions, not something that would shift back in the future.
Just looking at the supervisor's salaries here, about 50% is maybe 60,000 per position. That could maybe be switched over, so if it's 2, you're talking about like $120,000.
So it was a
might be
total
temporary.
of 400 and some thousand with the entire project team that would be redirected. 400 and, I don't remember, I need to sign into the,
Out of the general fund.
out of 1050 into the general fund. I mean, away from the general fund into 1050, sorry.
Rob, go ahead.
For the recording system, is there any way to structure the acquisition, maybe just spread the costs a little bit more over 2 years or more years such that it could lessen the impact to that and sort of,
Lease to own.
that's what I was thinking. We could look
Yeah.
and see if there's a lease option. And so we're just getting ready to start doing all the demos. So that's something that we'll ask, but I don't have the answer to that now.
Okay. Well, it's 9:51. I just want to do a time check since we do have treasurers at 10. Thank you, Auditor Hall, for coming in and going through your policy requests. Is there any questions for the auditor?
Now that I know that historic preservation and auditor M&O is the same, I'm pretty good.
Learn something new every day.
It's Good Friday weekend end now.
And then, yeah, as we go into deliberations, if you have any additional information on how your cuts could be structured, please let us know. And then on the lease to own on that, if that is also an option, if you'll just let us know, as we're making those considerations.
So the budget team will work with you on.
Okay,
Sounds
we will
good.
ask those questions.
Yes.
We are in recess until 10. We are back from break. It is 10:03 a.m. and we are picking up with the treasurer's office. Nicole, is there anything you would like to?
I think we can pass that on.
Okay, Treasurer Jeff Cadman.
Friday, it doesn't have today on it, is that right, or?
We should have.
I
today.
think her header for
Oh, yeah,
Friday
it's
says
misheaded.
Thursday.
Oh, well, I don't know what day of the week it is anymore.
It's on your.
It's
I
under
have two
Thursday.
That's
Thursdays.
labeled,
I
yeah.
see it, yeah.
I just
Okay,
want this
good
week to
enough.
go on Thursdays.
You were just
Really
testing
long
to see if I was
day.
paying attention, apparently.
Okay, so passing it to Treasurer Jeff Gadden, who's joined us here this morning. Go ahead, Treasurer.
Good morning, and thank you for your time, and I always know this is somewhat stressful time when you're trying to determine budgets, especially if you think you're looking at a downward trend in revenue, so I really appreciate your consideration of everybody's requests, because we're all trying to do the best we can for our citizens, and usually with minimal staff, so. Just a brief overview of the office. Number one responsibility, obviously, is safeguarding public money. We collect, we safe hold, and disperse funds for the county and over 40 other tax districts. In fact, only about 40% of our work is actually done on behalf of the county. 60% is done on the behalf of the other tax districts that we're responsible for their money. Major responsibilities: receiving and accounting of revenue, collection of taxes, disbursement of funds, cash management, debt management, and investment portfolio management. And on that last note, our investment portfolio is looking really good this year because of the interest rate increases. So funds managed by the treasurer that are in the budget, the REIT Technology Fund, 1160. This is a fee that's charged on every REIT transaction. We're proposing revenues in 2024 and 2025 of about 39,000. I actually believe once interest rates start to come down, that those numbers will prove to be somewhat conservative. But I want to be on the conservative side, because I'd rather come in and tell you, hey, we made 10,000 more than we predicted, rather than, we're short. Yes.
Go ahead. You probably have the same question I do.
Oh, I was gonna, probably yours is a little bit different, so go ahead. I was gonna ask about the red.
That's what I was gonna
Oh.
ask. Well, I don't have that sheet, but I was just gonna ask, you've got 39 coming in the next 2 years, 164, 167 going out, down to 66.9. Sounds like in future years, that's gonna go even deeper. So I'm sure we have a plan for that, but.
So right now, for the last few years, and I think it began in 2015 with an agreement between the prior treasurer and the assessor to fund one of his FTEs out of this fund. He actually has never spent those salary dollars to this point. He just has them earmarked within this fund. For the next 2 years, he's asked for that again. But he's also fully aware that there is no way we can ever let this fund go into the red. So that won't happen. If we're ending 2025 at, 66, 70,000, he fully realizes that our agreement is gonna have to change substantially.
Okay, so the expenditures for the 2 years is gonna go toward that position potentially, and then it may change after that, because
Correct.
we couldn't keep going at that rate.
Correct.
Okay.
It's been substantially the agreement all along.
Okay, so then the red ending fund balance is going to change just because of, I'm just trying to understand how that's,
Which sheet are you looking at,
She's got the
Commissioner?
longer-
So
The
the
10-year.
fund balance is not in the red at any point in time. So the line in red, that's a little
Oh, the net
confusing,
yearly
because that's the difference
Okay.
between the revenue and the expenditure.
I was looking at that and I was
But-
like, we're seeing a,
Right,
okay,
and
that's,
again, the agreement has been since the board made the agreement with the assessor, that he would only spend the amount that he needs to
Okay.
out of this fund in order to sustain a positive fund balance in this fund. And should this fund run out of money at that time, you'll need to reconsider where the position is funded from.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, the fund will never go into the red. If it ever goes to zero, then spending stops.
All right.
So general fund expenses, this is pretty self-explanatory. The biggest differences in the fund from one year to the next, so you'll notice 2023, from 2023 to 22 to 23 to 24, there's a pretty substantial increase in the other category. Most of that is interfund charges. Some of it is the extra communications that I've asked for because of the increase in postage and the increase in professional services because of increased printing and mailing costs. The personnel costs, excuse me, I'm sorry, personnel costs for 22 and 23 are quite a bit less than what you see in 2024. And that's because I have 2 staff members that are working on the ERP project. And so in 2022 and 2023, parts of their salaries were paid out of that ERP project fund rather than the general fund.
Which fund, which project was that?
The
BoCC.
financial system. Opportunities and challenges. You know, our one opportunity we've got, our Ascend property system is one of the oldest in the state that's operated by assessor and treasurer. And, you know, we installed that or went live in 1997. And our opportunity here is to look at obtaining brand new technology that is in the cloud that does a whole lot more of the way we would like to operate business now. That does come with a cost, but there's a lot of long-term benefits for citizens in that. Challenges, postage and supply costs continue to rise. Printing has risen almost as erratically as postage since the pandemic. We're being told by our printer, we can't even get colored paper anymore. So it's weird. Successfully implementing the new ERP system while maintaining our quality of service and cash management reporting it's a challenge and it's not insurmountable. And I do want to say none of these challenges are insurmountable. It's just things we're keeping our eye on so we can focus energy on these things. The volatility in the bond market, you know, the Fed raised interest rates extremely fast this year. And so the investment returns on the investment portfolio look incredibly good compared to years past. When the Fed starts to drop those interest rates, then obviously those bond rates are going to go down. But we are actively building the investment portfolio to help protect against declining interest rates. And then a challenge that so far has not proven to be insurmountable, but could in the future. The legislature has decided the last few years that it's really fun to put their fingers in the property tax pie. Changing
True fact.
interest and penalty structures and a whole lot of other stuff. And both assessors and treasurers have had very, very diligent people testifying in front of the legislature saying, hey, you don't want to mess with this too much. And then for our policy level proposal, it's actually good news for the general fund because I am moving 5% of the salaries for my customer service staff into 1160 because they are the ones that actively deal with REIT and electronic read in my office. And so that relieves roughly 12,000 out of the general fund every year.
So if you're looking at your sheet, Ty, Commissioner Menzer, the negative amount is the impact on the general fund. So it's a net zero, change request, but this is the impact on the general fund.
And this goes against the fund we were talking about at the beginning? I don't know all the
Yes.
numbers. Okay, 1160, got it.
Yep.
Can I ask a question on the software?
Sure.
Okay, so when I joined the board, there was already decisions made about a whole bunch of software systems that needed to be upgraded. And so, and then I knew there was a large IT committee that was, so I didn't put a lot of brain power to it because it sounded like before I even got here, thought had been put into all these different systems that were outdated and stuff. But yet here's another one that I'm really hasn't been on my radar. And so it seems to me like there are so many systems and so much need. It almost is like we need like a capital, like we have a capital facilities plan. And so we just know we have a queue and we have a long-term plan for like the upgrades and the investment and the savings it needed. And I kind of just probably jumped to a conclusion that we were thinking about it that way, but it's just like there's one system after another that I keep hearing about that I didn't even know about. And so,
Sherry is actually working on that
Yes.
list because
Okay.
I asked her for that
I have too.
specifically. Because I was like, I keep hearing about all these different systems and I was like, I feel like they're coming, right? We have the sheriffs on one side, we have.
Right.
And so I was like, it's very hard for
just
me
to be logical and
So I had asked her,
Fair
you
to-
know, once upon a time, we had a study, the ZIG report. And for whatever reason, the prior IT director chose to only address a subset of the list of systems that were in that report. So have asked Sherry to update the information we had from the report, get a complete list of all the systems across the county that we will eventually need to replace. And so we can come up with a plan, as you say, much like the capital improvement plan, but it would be the plan for what we need to have in the large system replacement reserve.
yeah, and I just want to do them in the right order, not just who happens to be the squeaky wheel or who's,
Right.
like we're actually doing them, okay, so maybe we have to delay them and they don't get done quite as fast as we'd like them to, but at least when we're doing them in a
Yes.
logical order.
And
That's
we have
fair. And
Great.
we don't have somebody with a system that's 26 years old. It's obviously, I don't even have to know about your system to know it's not, it can't possibly be adequate if it was 26 years,
That's exactly
designed
right.
26 years ago.
Yeah, and when this report came out, I mean, I've been asking for this list for the past 3 years, because I came in knowing that our systems were completely outdated and wanting to know, like, what is the plan to address all of these big system upgrades, knowing that there were already some in progress. But then seeing kind of a convoluted of squeaky wheel approach taking place on like who made the most noise, then that project got added, and then we were all of a sudden working on that project too. And I didn't really even sense an order, and then IT staff and resources just kept thinning out more and more and more, and I feel like this is kind of, Sherry has kind of picked this up, and it's like, just trying to make sense of it is a good word for it. She does know about this project, and she does have it on that list, knowing that it is going to be coming up and that it's a request. And I know she's been working, I believe, with the treasurer's office and the assessor's office on this and trying to get more information and seeing kind of what the guideline on this will be. Making sure it, at least that the ERP is phasing out, hopefully. And that way we can start another project. I have asked for my concern was IT resources is why I asked for this list. I keep getting concerned that we're thinning out our IT resources every time we start one of these big projects. Treasurer, my question for you, and also in regards to the system upgrade, I think it was one of your staff members, I think it was Mr. Sullivan, asked the question while we met with Strategies 360 about this system upgrade and if it would be something, right? And he was like, well, we're looking at this down the line. He's like, it's not like we, now, but we're planning for it and kind of seeing what's out there. And one of the points that Strategies 360 made was that's perfect because it gives us time to start educating our Congress people on this need, and that way it's not a surprise when it comes up. So I just kind of wanted to plant that seed, with your office, knowing that the assessor is here too, just have that in the back of your mind, right? It's like, how can we start knowing that this is going to be a big upheaval as well? It's going to require resources. How can we actually start making sure we have a holistic plan that we can present to Congress people early on and really start that education process? That way, if we are to make a request, right, there's already something in place that that we can, just work around.
That is a really good point, because I've always found that if you start telling your story early before you need to make the ask, once you get to making the ask, then they're already expecting it. So it removes that whole bit of awkwardness from the conversation.
Yeah.
And just to address Commissioner Menzer just a little bit, so the schedule that you saw for software replacement got blown out the window by the pandemic. And then with the extended time that it's taken to implement the ERP. So it's not quite like a blank sheet of paper, but it's close.
Okay. Anything else for the treasurer?
We do have reductions, but it's only $2,000, I believe. So
It covers reduction. Okay.
Well, and that's more than covered by the shift in the salary, so.
Any questions?
No questions.
I don't have any questions for you either.
My question is it, I don't know how the schedule and itinerary, is it possible to start earlier with the assessor? Because I actually have an 11:30 meeting I'd love to get to if
I'm gonna have to go to it like 11:20.
Oh, okay.
So I think that that's okay. My only hesitation is if someone were particularly interested in the assessor's budget, they'd be, following along. But I think that the master calendar just has a block of budget.
Yeah, it's kind of, I know it's how the
presentation,
agenda is
so-
structured, that's why
So
I'm
we
asking.
can move forward.
That's okay with the assessor too, obviously.
Actually, for continuity, I would like to start immediately and continue the discussion about the software, because I have more insight into that, having been involved in creating the fund.
So if you're good,
Works for me.
Thank you for your time and consideration this morning.
Thanks, Jeff.
thank you, Jeff.
Okay, so then we will go ahead and pick up with the assessor's office.
You guys reach agreement on these? Assessors and treasurers? Yes. Those two. Good, thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, I think it's 2 a.m., so I'll do the best I can. I had roughly a 24-hour travel day yesterday. But I did get some sleep, so. I wanted to, if I may, just continue the discussion about software, because I believe it was in 2005, could have been as late as 2007, that my top budget priority was to create a fund that we would pay into and all users would pay into each year, that would fund the software migration for the appraisal and tax administration software. And that fund was created and we have been paying into it every year. COVID, in my view, didn't really affect the timeline. What affected it, well, it may have in terms of IT. So, but what really impacted the timeline is the rapid acquisition and consolidation in the industry, in the software industry, to two major vendors, both sectors of the same parent company. And that occurred as Snohomish County was migrating this very same software. So going way back to the late 70s, early 80s, there were 4, I think, counties or maybe 5 that purchased mass appraisal software initially. But none of the smaller counties or the later counties had the resources to purchase that software, and it created a major inequity between counties and threatened to have the counties that had the software assessing more accurately and all of the rest of the counties unable to do that. And so that's when the REIT fund, it's interesting that all this kind of ties together. That's when the REIT fund was created. It was created to create at DOR, it was collected in every county, but the money went to DOR to grant out to counties as they proved readiness to purchase that mass appraisal software. So the fund was used exclusively for that until all of the counties got mass appraisal software, but our county paid into it and never got any of it because we purchased ahead of that solution. At the time that the fund was created, again in the mid-2000s, an assessment was made of every department across the county that utilizes the software and a proportionate number of users. That's how each office paid into the fund. Now, I didn't agree with the byproduct of that because assessor and treasurer's revenue serves the entire county, so it should be a general fund and paid into by everybody in my view, but that's not how it occurred. That's how the money has gone into that fund. So in the meantime, because the large corporations that went through the acquisitions were in contract negotiations with Snohomish County, the first county to migrate to this new software, it delayed that. It took a total of 6 years. They're not yet completely live with their software migration. A total of 6 years to go through that process. And so we did not want to go first because we don't have the staff that Snohomish County has and the larger counties have. We needed to have the blueprint made by a larger county so that we could benefit from it here in Thurston County. So the original plan had a succession of focus for that fund. And we shifted ourselves much later in that succession of focus because Snohomish County hadn't proven the efficacy of the software to where we wanted to go into an RFP until we could see that it wasn't, dreamware, that it was real. And so that got us to a couple of years ago where we could see the completion in Snohomish County, but then we were focused on ERP here in our county and other projects that were, festering and taking a lot longer. And so then the delay has shifted to waiting for a period in IT amplified by staffing difficulties where they could handle the RFP and the migration process because we don't have the staff to do it in-house. So we would apply all our staff, but it's going to take a substantial heavy lift from IT. So that's how we got to today without migrating, and that's why we're, I guess we're squeaky, Commissioner, but we're for sure overdue to have the migration, and we've been doing all of our due diligence here in the interim. A lot of meetings with the vendors to become as well versed as we can. We'll be traveling to other counties to look on the ground at the functionality of their systems. And through that, one thing that we learned is that each of the vendors, the major vendors that will ultimately be serving the entire state, use a sub-vendor, the same sub-vendor. And this sub-vendor specializes in a field appraisal app that works with an iPad. And it allows you to live pull from the cloud data and feed information back into the cloud where it rests until you come back to the office and it comes back to the county through our firewall and is imported into our database. And that system is a separate vendor. We've done quite a bit of work on that because in realizing that it was gonna be the same major component of the migration. That is, it's the interface that my staff looked through. So we trained to that interface. And it would be a luxury to be able to train to that interface before the larger migration so that we simply focus on the integration of the larger software into the assessor and auditor and general county systems. And that software can be funded from the IT replacement fund. The hardware cost is vastly less than our current hardware cost for our field devices. We use tough pads. They're much more expensive than the iPad. And even though we're a few years away from when we're scheduled to replace our field devices, which are not cloud connected, there's enough money in that fund to fully replace with the iPad that would run from this software. The third component of it is an annual maintenance fee of about $36,000. And as you discussed a little while ago, we propose that being funded from REIT. And the consequence is that if we move forward with this segment of the ultimate migration, that it has no general fund impact. That is, it's pulling from the dedicated funds that were intended for this purpose. And the only exception is the maintenance cost, which can be pulled from REIT. And it's going to be interwoven into my whole presentation because we requested FTEs and we need FTEs. And cutting our staff will break our office and our ability to meet our deadlines, and I'll cover that later. But this will provide some relief, and it's relief that we can get without general fund money. So we put a lot of effort we shifted from looking at the overall migration as our primary effort because IT tells us we're still pushed out, maybe out of the biennium because of staffing and other projects. But this one segment, if we get it, can help us greatly. And I had one other thing to mention in regard to that. Oh, and it's a sole source provider. So it's been through the auditor here at the county, and he signed off that in fact it would qualify as a sole source provider. So there's not an RFP burden. From an IT standpoint, it's a very low burden for IT, and those are their words. Internally, it's a training that needs to happen as we need to train our people up on using a different field product. Training we were going to have to do anyway. Training it when we complete it and put it into use will still afford us a net savings in terms of labor. So I commend that to you, and it's not one of our budget priorities because it doesn't have a general fund implication, but it is now, I would put it at a crisis level that we move forward quickly to replace it, because I doubt seriously we're going to get the FTEs that we need, and you're proposing a cut that would cost us more than 3 FTEs. So with that,
How much is that, the initial phase part of the system?
I have a handout, and I'm happy to hand it to you.
one time.
Yeah, that's what this is. So there's 4 copies.
Is it this one?
Commissioners can
Yes,
check.
That's included in your packet.
We have this.
Which page does it?
They've got it.
It would be
It's
after
in
the
our packet
presentation.
here.
Yes.
Okay. Yep. Okay, I got it.
Okay. So, so we can table that and, I guess just begin with presentation. Why don't we do that? But first, are there any questions about that former discussion that I?
You know, I guess I always have one question about technology. Is there ongoing licensing and other connections that, you know, hookups that we are unforeseen costs, but ongoing costs?
Yeah, it's a good question. Our current situation is that we have a send that serves several offices within the county. It's not being adequately maintained any further. When we have a problem and a difficulty, we're dealing with someone across the ocean. And so it's a legacy system that is at risk. And the assessment software the current lay of the land is that the vendors picked off the auditor's office for one product, the treasurer's office with another product. Our office were with yet another vendor. Some of them have consolidated over here and some of them have consolidated over here. And all of these systems have arcane wiring that makes them work together in the county. The software that we're proposing, Jeff and I, the two systems that would be part of this acquisition would be one system, and there's no wiring between separate software to make it function for the entire county. And so the proposed change is the elegance that we would always seek, Commissioner. And what we have now is, well, what's what we have now, right? As software came online and it made it was a good choice to get software that functioned for the auditor, it was a good choice to get software that functioned for the treasurer and tax administration. And it was a good choice to get mass appraisal software, but they aren't all the same vendor and it's a very clunky system. And then for the workers who are using the software, it's ridiculously cumbersome. And so it makes it therefore more expensive for us to train when we have new hires. And it's much more difficult to modify as the legislature gives us more work to do or changes the criteria. Much more difficult to update the software to make that work. Long answer, is that sufficient? All right.
Let's start with the presentation.
So with that, first screen, for you and the folks at home, the assessor's office is responsible for identifying, locating, and fairly valuing all real and personal property within the county for tax purposes, as well as administering property records, current use programs, and tax exemption programs. Chief among those is the senior exemption program in terms of its workload. The well-being of local government and of the taxpayers it serves depends on the thoroughness and fairness of the assessor's work. And that's the first screen. Second screen. So this shows at a point in time, the assessor's general fund budget in 23, 24, and 25. And the most important thing for me to point out as you look at this screen is that we were 100%, well, we're 99% general fund. This is all general fund dollars, so 100% of this is general fund. But our office as a total is a little over 99% general fund. It's very unusual in the county. That 1% is the REIT fund. And so when we have a general fund cut, it's cutting the entire budget of my office. And the other thing to point out is that of the total budget, the lion's share of it is personnel and benefits. And of the remaining portion, estimated here for 2023 at 1.6 million, only $117,400 is not interfund. So the interfund rates that we charge for our presence in this facility and for software and computers and all of that is not something that is discretionary within my office. And the money, the $117,400, that pays for mandatory mailings, printing, all of the other costs of my operation. There isn't any voluntary expense in there. Like, we're not buying coffee, for people. We did a study a few years ago at the request of the commission that all offices did, and we participated in it. And it was to identify everything that you do, everything that you spend money on, and whether it was voluntary or required or mandatory. And that study showed that the only voluntary expense in my office was the postage, the return. We send out return address postage, postage paid envelopes with requests for data whenever there's a property sale. And we need that data, and we don't want the lack of a stamp to reduce the response rate, so we provide the stamp. That's the only thing. It was a couple $1,000 a year, literally less than, I think, $2,000 a year. So 99% general fund and 100%, nearly 100% mandatory expenditures. Next screen, please. So I listened to some of your discussion about the refund. Yeah, okay. And we've gone through some iterations of how to work with that fund, caused in part by the discovery of the field appraisal tool and the desire to be current in what we present to you with budgetary challenges that the county faces in the general fund. And in part as a reaction to the cuts and a desire to be sure that we adequately utilize this fund during, for our office, is going to be an extremely stressful and challenging period. And so the balance that we were able to save in this fund, we're going to apply during, it's our rainy day fund, if you will. It's minuscule, but it is really how we're applying it here. And so the expenditures that we have out of this fund continue to fund the one FTE and more completely with benefits fund that FTE, and then fund the maintenance cost of the software for a field appraisal. So as to be able to tell you with truthfully that that does not have a general fund implication. And in fact, it has a general fund savings because the amount that needs to be interfund put aside for hardware replacement will actually be reduced as a result of shifting to an iPad. Understandable to have some concern about the diminishing balance in this fund. The assessors and treasurers met and agreed, both associations, to jointly pursue an increase in the REIT fund fee from the $5 currently to $20. And components of that bill that we agreed to, the two associations, are to increase it to $20, to split it between assessor and treasurer, 65% to assessors and 35%, 65 and 35, that's 135% for treasurers. And that split is based upon the relative size of our operations and also the percentage of our work that's focused on property tax. 100% in our office, somewhere like 70% in the treasurer's office. They do a lot of administration work for the county in addition to that. And that's important. It's part of the sell to the legislature is that we're doing the legislature's work, more of their work than your work, in properly valuing property, collecting and distributing property tax. And so the committees that these bills will run through, this bill will run through, are very keenly aware of that. It's what I educate them on every year as the legislative chair for assessors, that, the functionality of our offices, they should have a keen interest in because it is a major funding source for them, for schools, et cetera. And so, they're very interested in a bill that helps us fund our operations, and they're interested in a bill that we both agree to. So that's what's going forward next year. There is a sponsor. We expect it to succeed, actually, even in a short year. It may have gone last year, but there was not an accord between assessors and treasurers.
Thank you, Assessor, that was going to be my question. Because this was put forward last year, and it was, I believe it was a 50-50 split between assessors and treasurers, but it did not pass
It didn't, you
the
didn't get it.
committee, so, and I believe it was, you testified against it, so I just kind of can you provide a little bit more context on this?
Sure.
Why you think maybe it will pass this year when last year it didn't?
Sure. The chair and the members of Ways and Means listened to our testimony as why the bill did not get out of committee. It was sponsored by a very popular and capable legislator, Senator John Lovick, a former House member, a former county commissioner, a former sheriff. The bill came from the current treasurer in Snohomish County. It didn't come from the association. The associations had already been in discussions to try to resolve the split and the amount to ask for. This former assessor himself was a former legislator serving with Senator Lovick. So he went directly to Senator Lovick and the bill got dropped. We were all surprised by it, both assessors and treasurers. So my testimony, if you saw it, what I appealed to the Ways and Means Committee was to put the bill down. I had previously discussed with Senator Lovick, who I have huge respect for. It just was a hot mess to bring it forward the way that it came forward. And he had no knowledge that the two associations were in discussions but hadn't resolved discussions, and that the bill didn't reflect the direction we were going. And so, as the chair, now a commissioner in Kitsap County, said, so you're going to bring this back next year after having reached an agreement. And that's exactly what our commitment was, and that's exactly what was achieved last week at the conference between assessors and treasurers after a lot of work between Jeff and myself and our respective associations. So I'm not in the business of putting out there unrealistic expectations, but I am legitimately optimistic that the bill will pass this session.
Thank you.
Is that good? So, the only other thing I'd say about this fund is when the bill passes, it'll clarify the split. So all of the opinions and whatnot and territorialism on this fund will be specified in statute, and life will be easier for all concerned.
What was the bill number last year? Do you remember?
Don't recall.
Okay, thank you.
It'll be totally different this year, though. They won't pull up the same bill because it didn't pass out of committee.
Okay,
If it had passed out of one chamber,
it would have used the same number, yeah.
one of those so-called zombie bills.
There'll be a bit of lag though because of the lack of resources going into the REIT funding for the next year or so.
Yes, sir, there will be, which is why our proposal does not fully spend the REIT fund during the biennium, because if the bill passes this year, and even if it passed next year, the inflow will be there for the next year.
And home sales are down, too.
True. Yeah, but the revenue here is, 46, 39, or 4 times that revenue split with the formula. So even with activity being down, which it won't stay, but it is, the revenue will be significantly up. So opportunities and challenges. This is a dated page. Challenges are budget cuts, and I should focus only on that. But look, your job is not easy. Your job is to look at the resources that the county has and approve budgets for the individually electeds and the rest of general government. And I respect that territory that you have and the responsibility that you've chosen. My responsibility is to come to you and advocate for what I need. And so I did that, and I will do that today, not disrespectfully, but to articulate what our needs are and have been the whole way. So over the past biennium, my office has seen retirement of management level personnel. And in the next biennium, we will be impacted again by retirement of management level personnel. This is significant because that's really where the brain trust is in management. And our work to backfill those replacements and succession planning is endemic in some of my requests here today. In addition, we have, there's good news which comes with bad news, right? We have a valued employee out on maternity leave, twins, exciting. But at a busy time when we're asking for FTEs and we're facing cuts, that's an employee that's offline. We also have a couple employees with FMLA implications in the coming year. And these may seem like minuscule things for me to mention, but what I would highlight for you is that in my tenure, since 2011, January 1 of 2011, we have never had a vacancy in my office last more than 30 days. So I reorganized to eliminate management and restore part-time personnel to full-time. We reorganized and cross-trained our personnel. That's how we've been getting the job done with fewer FTEs than we had in 2008. When we have someone out on maternity leave, that's a big hit. When we have people out on FMLA, that's a big hit. When we're facing eliminating over 3 FTEs, that's a catastrophic hit. So that's our biggest challenge. It's amplified by what the legislature does each year, and they keep trying to find solutions to the housing problems, affordable housing, and other challenges in our community, all of our communities. And those are worthy challenges, but the way that they're addressing them is, and trying to address them, is through property tax exemption, which is an administrative challenge and causes work in our office. So every year, there are dozens of proposals, and every year I testify against all these things socially that I believe in because of the administrative burden on the office and the fact that they don't come with the funding. And this year will be no different in that regard. Additionally, the number of parcels in the county grows every year. Last year, the parcels grew by 1,100. We now have more than 130,000 parcels that we have to inspect once every 6 years. And assessors did advocate for the senior exemption update necessity because of the growth in cost of living dramatically in our county. And seniors are on a fixed income. It causes them to receive Social Security increases, which then would cause them to fail out of the program. So they'd have a bigger hit in property tax than the increase in Social Security that they'd receive from the federal government. So the program had to be updated to accommodate that. When we update the senior exemption program, it brings a huge wave of applications to our office. We'll see somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,800 additional applications that we must work through with seniors and family members. And this is not an easy process. The exemption program is very targeted. And so you start with your 1040 and your adjusted gross income, but then there are pages of RCW that determine what can and can't be deducted from that, what counts and doesn't count. And it's complicated and daunting for seniors, even when they have help with a family member. And therefore, it requires a lot of staff time to work through that. It's why we designed our office with individual offices for meeting with seniors, because those are confidential discussions about income and wealth and expenses. But the burden of that is, it would be debilitating even if you said no additional FTEs for that side of my office. It's a huge wave of work. In King County, they ended up with a 9-month, 10-month backlog in processing senior exemption requests. It's disrespectful, it's extremely inefficient because they linger for that entire point in time, and that paper and those records end up buried somewhere, and you start again every time you're able to touch the account. So it's a huge challenge for us, and a policy level requests were intended to address that. And I'll move to those. So the next item is policy, well, if there are no questions, policy level proposal priority 2. And this is a request for a commercial appraiser analyst. So in our office, we have the job descriptions of appraiser trainee, a senior appraiser, a appraiser analyst. Those are the folks that take all the data and make the judgments and do the mass appraisal work for different sectors of property in our community. And the one position in the appraiser analyst ranks that takes by far the most expertise is the position that's focused on commercial appraiser analysis, property analysis. So we've had an inequity for a long time because there hasn't been a designated position with that definition. And priority two is this request. This request standing alone, by the way, has a very modest general fund implication. Something, it's not listed here, but it's somewhere in the less than $25,000 range annually. It's a step increase. It simply isn't appropriate to differentiate between appraiser analyst and the commercial appraiser analyst.
Stephen, are you able to comment on how that would align with the comp class study? Was that a position that was reviewed in that study?
It was a position that we emphasized in the study and focused on and presented, but it is not reflected in what came back from the study. So
Thank you.
I can only say that it was an exhaustive study. It didn't touch this challenge. It also didn't touch career ladder, which was another priority, longstanding, and getting a career ladder position for appraisers. If you'll recall, I have to come to you with a AR when I promote from a appraiser assistant to a senior appraiser, which we do when they become accredited so they don't get filched from another county, and it's quite time sensitive. But we have the challenge that if I'm fully staffed and that person gets accredited, it's a kind of a systematic catch-22. You can't promote somebody from one position to another when you only have the one position. So we've been seeking a career ladder, and it also wasn't addressed in the study, but it wasn't.
Can I ask real quick before we leave that item?
Yes.
Can I ask about the number on the cheat sheet versus what the assessor just described in terms of general fund impact?
Do you see that?
So they actually have two different separate requests in the system for this. The first request is to actually create the classification of the position. The second request is to fill the position. And so this is put in as filling the position. It's not put in as reallocating a position into this
There's no
position.
cost to doing the reclass.
There's no cost to creating the position, but they have a separate request in to add a commercial appraiser analyst. And this might be something that we need to touch base with after to get it
Yes.
corrected.
Commissioner, excuse me for, I raised that point here in light of the budget situation. So the next request, priority level 3, as she was explaining, is to create, to add another position to our office. That is, this person who is an appraiser analyst who would become the commercial appraiser analyst would promote from appraiser analyst into commercial appraiser analyst. So the entire cost of that is reflected here of $126,500. And then we would fill the appraiser analyst position. In lieu of that, at a much lower general fund cost, is we don't add a position. We simply reclassify the existing position and the employee gets us a classification increase. And that's where the roughly $20,000 comes in annually. So the choice would be do nothing, add the FTE for $126,500, which we need, or reclassify this position at roughly $20,000. Those would be the three choices. Is that,
That
did I
helps.
get that correct?
And then that'll deal with retention.
Yes? Yes. So, I just sort of covered the policy level, request number 3, which is the second part of that. And, let's see, give me a minute here.
Do we know while he's looking, because I'm a little bit irritated about the career ladder piece. At least, I think the board, at least I articulated that as a high priority for the study, and the assessor's office was one of the key things I had in mind when I made that request and asked for that priority. And I thought when we got a high level presentation about the class and comp study, that there was elements of career ladders built in. I didn't go office by office, position by position. And so I'm just wondering if what he said is accurate, is there a way for us to do that anyway? I mean, if it makes sense, because I mean, his office is the one that, like, as you pointed out, we've basically been doing it like through this mechanical
Right.
process that's just
Yes,
senseless.
you have. He.
So what's the point
assessor
of
brings
keeping-
in a reclass,
Yeah, so
reclass.
A, why wasn't that recognized by the study and addressed? And
Right.
B, the fact that it wasn't, how do we get around
Right.
that
You
fault,
heard the
that
same
failure?
issue in the auditor's
Well, the auditor had the same
office,
thing.
and I think a number of other departments have a challenge. So I don't know how that was addressed in the study. I have a note to ask Maria to come back during your review week, and that is something we need to bring up with her.
And
Because I think that there's a way to structure positions. We don't currently do it in our personnel policy. But we could structure our positions in such a way that you could bring someone in at a lower level, and once they get accredited or their certification or whatever the criteria is, that they would automatically move to a higher level. And you could do that within a single position, and nobody would have to come and ask for the reclass thing.
And I agree with that 90%. I would say that there are two sections of my office that we emphasize this as a priority, and we've worked with HR for, I think, 4 years now on this subject. But the other side is on the property control analyst versus senior property control analyst position. Instead of accreditation on that side of the office, it's mastery of one of the areas of focus for that side of the office, and we likely would require passing a test similar to the one that's in the
Right.
auditor's office. On the appraiser side, it is being accredited. It is achieving the 1,000 hours managed and overseen by an accredited appraiser and being accredited by the state. I would interject about automatically, it would still be at the appointing authority's discretion.
Exactly.
Or even at your discretion. We just wouldn't have to go through the 2 steps because we don't have a vacancy to promote into. It would make it functionally a much greener, leaner way to go. We should seek every one of those situations.
Right. So, and I absolutely agree. It wouldn't necessarily be a certification. The requirement would be relevant to whatever the type of position is that, we have at hand. This is a somewhat significant change to what we do today. And I think that the work that HR, the barrier has been that HR doesn't have capacity to develop this type of a policy. So I think that, again, it needs to be a conversation with Maria, but there are some options that the county has to doing these that would make it much more streamlined.
There's a good model in the auditor's office already for the appraiser analyst and for the property control analyst to senior property control analyst. That's the test model. On the appraiser side, I get that it does take time, and it does, but it's pretty straightforward. It's if you're accredited at the discretion of the appointing authority, you can be promoted without having a vacancy to promote you into, right? So,
Right.
Yeah, no,
Thank you for-
It's common at the state
I
as
thought we
well.
were asking the class comp study not like if, but where and how.
Yeah, where
I
can
didn't
we
know
do
that we were,
this?
I mean, I really wasn't asking. I was like, I wanna see this and I want guidance from your expertise as to where it would best apply and how it would be structured.
So we gave that input. We were given the interim product. What do you think of it? We emphasized that it was not in there, and then we got the finished product and it wasn't in there.
Okay, thank you.
I just wanna do a time check, so go ahead, assessor.
Sorry.
So, policy level, request 3 was for the commercial appraiser analyst classification. We wrapped that up. And what I would do is, fast forward to policy level request 5. Were you to increase the classification of a property control analyst to commercial property control analyst, that creates a need for policy level 5, which is that my appraisal supervisor would have the same classification, the same pay classification as someone that position supervises. And so this request is to increase that by 1 step. So it is, I think it's 1 step. So it is, you know, representative of the supervisory responsibility. And this has an annual cost of roughly $11,000. So the least expensive way to achieve that is to increase the classification of the existing appraiser analyst to senior, to a commercial appraiser analyst at roughly $20,000, and to increase this position at a cost of $11,000, $31,000, and that section of the office is properly aligned. Or we defer that because of budget challenges. Right? So, so again, the note that I put on this policy level 5 is asterisk only needed if request number 2 is approved. Now, if we back up to policy level request 4, this is the request that gets at the senior exemption increase and the wave of work that's coming our way because of that in 2024.
That has to do with legislation.
Yes, sir. And so this is a request for 2 full-time FTEs. We have currently used our extra help budget to hire a date certain temporary employee, which is a way to get someone introduced to our office and trained. And were one of these positions to be approved, that person would be a strong candidate for that and already be trained for it. But this is to allow us to absorb this wave of work for the senior exemption and still get all of the work that's driven by construction activity and development activity done timely, and to address all of the other activities on that side of the office, of which there are many.
And that's a general fund issue?
It is, sir.
I don't know where we'd look at this, but I don't know what your breakdown is between seniors and disability and veterans.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any idea what that is? About, is it 50-50 or, we have quite a senior group that lives in our community, but we've also got a lot of veterans that live in the community, and many of those have disabilities, and that's why they're here, is because we have Madigan and things that help that. Is it possible that we might be able to use our veterans fund, because we're helping veterans to offset this need? And I don't know if there's something similar that we could look at from a disability standpoint. There is some, and I can't think of the name of the fund.
Here's the DD.
Yeah, there's
Funding
there's
in
something there, so
1500.
is there possibly an ability that would justifiably get this away from current expense, but yet be able to fund the project?
If I may, I can, one challenge, although it's interesting and I appreciate the question, I'm interested in the answer, but it may take research, but you would then want data from us. How many disabled veterans exemptions are there? And it's we could give you a partial number, and here's why. When someone comes in and applies for an exemption, if they qualify for the senior exemption irrespective of their disability, then they end up in that program, and that's the direction things go. But if their only way to qualify is as a disabled veteran, then we would be able to count them as disabled veterans. So if you ask me for the data, I'd be able to identify part of the total.
What's the percentage of disabled, say in the veteran category? So you know, a lot of people have a hearing exemption is 10% or something. Others have very serious disabilities. So is there a cutoff period there or just the title?
So the law was changed. We advocated for a change in the law because when that exemption was first created, I believe it was either 100% or 90%. And it was found that statewide, almost no military qualified for that, based on the system of measurement. And it was viewed, and that research was done with Madigan, and Congress representatives to try to get a handle on where's the proper line, to not lower the bar so low, but to make sure that the intent of the legislation could occur, and it was lowered to 80%. So it's why there isn't a very high number, because you have to be 80% disabled. And really, it's that 80 to 90% where everybody is who qualifies.
So that's something that maybe legislation could even bump, knock it down to 60% or whatever, I don't know. But is it possible that we might be able to use these other funds to help this out? And we don't know the answer to that right now.
That's
but,
exactly right.
you know,
We
let's
don't know
look
the
let's
answer
look
to
into
that
it
right
and see
now.
if
We
get
can
some-
certainly look and see.
I think just to close on that, it unfortunately would have a very minor effect. It's a good idea, but,
Okay.
Well, we're
Just-
looking for a way to fund the FTE,
Yeah.
not from the general fund.
Yeah,
understand.
we're just
Yeah.
trying to come up with something.
that would be.
Somehow
that would be
it would be a stretch,
Well,
Commissioner.
let's do some
but we'll look
stretching. We
at
got
it.
money in that fund, I know we do.
Yes, we have a significant amount of money in the Veterans Fund, but we're
Anyway,
also
just something to be
coming
thinking
up with
about.
ways to spend it to directly benefit our veterans.
And I gather what we're talking about, being a realist, is not a strategy to increase my number of FTEs, but a way to save an FTE. And I would appreciate whatever can be done in that regard. And if you need data from me, I'll get it for you.
I think a lot of that stuff we can work on an estimation, a guesstimation, an estimation or something, I don't know.
Let's get through the last priority because
Okay.
there's 5 more minutes and then after that.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to slide here before too.
So the last priority is simply a succession planning priority. When I was elected, before I reorganized and reduced management, the office had a chief deputy and a chief appraiser. And, you know, my chief deputy retired, my levy specialist been with the office for, I don't know, 30-something years, and, you know, she was promoted into that position of chief deputy and agreed to work another 1 to 2 years, but she's on the verge of retiring. And before that occurs, I need to have an ability to bring a serious management level mass appraiser, someone that can run the show on that side, into the office, and I can't bring them in at a lower level. And so because this FTE hasn't been utilized, it was eliminated from the classifications. It exists, the words exist, it's just not an active classification. This has no budget implication at this time. It's simply to recreate the job description so that it's available for succession planning. So you would likely allow me, the county manager would likely allow me to pre-fill for a major position like that so that there can be a period of overlap and alignment. What I would likely do is bring someone in as a chief appraiser for a slightly longer period, as much as 4 months, to have them learn the systems and learn the intricacies in our office, so that when they migrate into the major position, it's closer to seamless. And I can't do that without this classification active, so I've requested to have it reactivated.
So,
The choice to actually hire that person is with your authority in the future. We're not creating another FTE in my office.
so would you then reclass one of your current positions? If this were an active
It's
classification?
So it's possible I would do that. It's possible I would promote into it from internally. It's possible I would hire externally. It's possible if I were desirous of doing that, you would tell me I would need, you all would tell me I would need to wait until I have a vacancy to do so. All of those decisions, I'm not asking you to make today.
Okay.
But it's simply, this has to be out of the way. And we're told by HR that it has to be a budget level request in the biennium for it to occur during the biennium. And I will have this vacancy during the biennium, so we put it forward.
Sure. Okay.
Well, thank you, Assessor. One of the last items that we want to give you an opportunity is to discuss the 8% cut and how you plan to address that. And if there is not a plan now, we would ask for it before we start deliberations, but I wanted to give you that opportunity.
What I would revisit in answering that question is that in 2011, I reorganized to restore part-time positions to full-time and to eliminate management. We eliminated 3 management positions at that time. We've cross-trained both sides of my office for coverage and got great efficiencies out of that. In the 13 years, we've never had a vacancy of more than 30 days, and I raised that again because there are a number of offices that aren't doing anything wrong, but when you propose what amounts to a 10% cut of their FTEs, they're cutting vacant positions, where I'm cutting filled, trained, valued county employees in every case, and it is different. It's more difficult for me, but I signed up for this job, but it's different because they're existing employees. And except for REIT, we're 100% general fund. And when you look at the general fund, there's only the roughly back to the screen, roughly $117,000 that is not FTE or interfund. And so when you propose a $408,000 cut, that's the majority of 4 FTEs. So do I have a plan? I do not have a good plan. It is cutting 4 FTEs. I appeal to you to do whatever you
Print some
can.
money.
Hmm?
You appealed us to print some money.
Well, I meant no disrespect, and I meant most sincerely what I said at the beginning, that it's a difficult chore that you have. But the functionality of my office generates a great deal of revenue for this county, and the loss of that many FTEs will push our calendar beyond the statutory requirements. We were asked to develop that. I did develop it. I do have handouts. These would be the statutory deadlines. By no means is this a complete list of our statutory obligations, but these are the statutory deadlines. The consequence of that is that if we can't get our appraisal work done in time, then our reval notices go out late. And the appeal period ends late. And certification of values ends late. And this meeting ends up occurring in December rather than in the month that we're in now, because our work is not done. The consequence of that is, because the last step in the cycle is to capture new construction, that we will not capture all of the new construction. And that's not a threat, it's a reality. It is that new construction is captured, is visited multiple times. So particularly on the projects that are most important to the county. That a commercial project is under construction the entire year. And when the permit is issued and they get to a first inspection point, we inspect and we revisit. But especially on those larger projects, we revisit just before the deadline for capturing new construction. We may still be valuing property at that point and not have the staff available to capture that new construction. That's the magnitude of the cut that $408,000 will cause in my office. So my plan, I don't have one, other than that's the only place I have to cut. And I implore you to prioritize funding my office over setting up a rainy day fund. This is a rainy day. in my office, we're 100% staffed. And we're eliminating people we've invested in for years. And it'll take years to recreate that. So statistically, in closing, I would illustrate this. In 2008, the assessor's office had 37 employees. In 2011, it had 27.25 employees, 5 of which were part-time. When I reorganized in 2011, I was able to create 30 FTEs without increasing my budget by eliminating management. That's exactly what you'd want me to do. That's what I did. That's how I got to 30. We are, in 2023, we have 33 FTEs. One of those is the REIT FTE, and 2 were increases that occurred over the successive 13 years. So we are at 33, still 4 below 2008, and the budget cuts would take me back to about 1998 in terms of staffing. And the work goes up every year. We cannot get the work done with a cut of that magnitude.
So the proposal that you're saying is it would be to cut 4 FTEs is what you would have to do to get to that level of 8%.
It's the only thing I can do. I can't touch interfund. The portion of my budget, which is not interfund or staff, is $117,400. It's all spent on mandatory. I mean, the only exception to that is the increase in the mailing that's necessary for employee safety. And that change occurred in a presidential year between 2 candidates, and we have the same 2 candidates likely in the next presidential election, and the same vitriol and angst at government showing up at your door. I simply won't. It's my authority, and I'm gonna tell you, I won't cut the mailing and jeopardize employee safety to continue to employ 1 employee at the risk of all of my other field staff. It's the only mechanism I have. And so consequently, the only thing I can cut, Commissioner, is FTE.
Okay.
It's no plan at all, it's a reality.
I think that's the reality that many of us are facing currently, and we've heard it from other offices. It's a difficult situation. We understand as a board, but it's just where we are at. So thank you for your presentation, Assessor. It is 11:20.
Commissioner?
We are-
I must ask for deference for a moment. There's in your numbers, that for the preliminary estimate of assessed value, your numbers are low by somewhere in the neighborhood of $643 million because of a failure to add a state assessed utility to that. And that, so our forecast of revenue from that is that revenue to the county of $508,000 from that error in projection that's in the budget numbers. So we can explain that in greater detail
Nicole?
offline. Although I'm correct in what I'm saying here. And so that's one item. The second item is that the priority bill for assessors statewide that was adopted by all of the affiliates last week is an aerial imagery bill that would have the state purchase aerial imagery and give it free to all the counties and the cities and the tribes and agencies. And that would have a positive budget implication for this county of over $300,000 during the biennium. So those 2 things, one a reality today, the other a bill that I've first worked on the study bill, got that passed, the studies increased. We have a sponsor, we're pursuing that legislation. Those are just 2 things to consider.
Just to, while we're still on the record, the numbers that we've given the board are the numbers we've gotten from your office.
We did give you the
So-
number, but you did not add the state assessed utility to that number.
We hadn't gotten those
So
numbers
we've
yet.
not received that as of yet.
Well, I didn't I didn't tender, I'm not in the discussion, I'm certainly not pointing fingers, that's not the point. The point is that, that the number that you're playing with is low, and it's low to the effect of impacting negatively your projection of property tax revenue to the county of over $500,000.
Well, if your office can send our budget team the correct numbers, then we can start with that, and
Absolutely.
Nicole,
I would
Nicole's.
just like to make a note that the numbers aren't incorrect. As the information that you've given to us as preliminary numbers, we have assessed them correctly. Any new information that you have, we're more than welcome to put that together and provide updated numbers.
Okay, I don't wanna debate that. The point in time that we're in is that that the state has not finalized utility, it's an estimated utility, but it does produce this much revenue.
Okay.
Not reflected in your budget numbers.
It's 11:23. I wanna go ahead, because commissioners here have other things they have to attend. We are adjourned.